Hey everybody, welcome to video number 2, the characters of the hero's journey. In this video, we are going to dive a little bit deeper into the archetypes and characters of the hero's journey. Before we do so, let's talk a little bit about how these archetype characters came to be and how they're influenced. Again, we talk about Joseph Campbell, and as he's creating in his book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces, he's writing down all these archetypes, but he's heavily influenced by a psychiatrist named Carl Jung, whose theories of collective unconsciousness involved all of these archetypes, these recurring images and patterns and ideas from dreams and myths that go across various cultures. And so Campbell, using Jung's ideas and theories, developed the following archetypes and found that they exist in myth, not just the monomyth, but myth. So these are used in many different types of stories. In this video, what I plan to do is go over a brief summary of each of these archetypes, as well as try to give a couple examples from some stories that you might recognize, some stories that are a little bit more popular or in pop culture. There are lots of examples, and I'm sure as we go along, you can think of some as well. You will notice that I also give examples of ones that fit the type really well. I may not stick with the same story through the entirety of the examples. As you will hopefully see, there are many different ways to fit a character into this archetype. The archetype is just the guideline for what you're doing. You, when you're writing your characters, can let your imaginations run wild. They're your characters. You get to create them. Just keep these guidelines in mind as we are writing a hero's journey. Of course, first up is the hero. This is the central figure, or figures, depending on how expansive your story is, that your story will follow. There will be a protagonist, and that is your hero. Again, defined in these videos as a non-gendered term. It's anyone who you're choosing to make be the protagonist or the lead of your story. This is your character who will be changed by the events of the quest. Remember, everyone is the hero of their own myth. Common heroes can be characters that we've listed before in the previous videos, such as Dorothy, or Frodo, or Bilbo, or Harry Potter, etc. The Shadow. The Shadow, as you may have guessed, is the other word for the villain, and we use the word shadow because there's going to be some characteristics that the hero and the villain, or its shadow in this case, share. This is going to be your main antagonist through your story. The antagonist can be defined as the force or person that stands in the way of your hero or protagonist meeting their destiny. This could mean it's one villain, it could be several villains, or perhaps it could be an internal struggle or a grander fear inside. There's lots of ways that this can be represented. If you are doing a super internal story, it could even be one hero's own desires to move to the shadow side, really represented well in Star Wars with the light side and the dark side. Some really common shadows include the Wicked Witch of the West, Darth Vader, Scar, etc. The Mentor. This is the hero's guide or guiding principle if you don't have a physical person. This is the help that the hero will see. This mentor usually comes from a person who is older, is an elder, is wiser, definitely more experienced. Oftentimes it can come with some form of supernatural aid. They've been in the special world and they've gained abilities. This can be somebody like Gandalf, Dumbledore, Rafiki, or an Obi-Wan Kenobi. The next character you're going to find is the Herald. This is the one that brings the call to adventure. In a story like Cinderella, it's literally the king's herald who brings the invitation. This could be a person, it could also be an event. Other big heralds are characters like R2-D2 or Hagrid. The next characters we're going to talk about are the Threshold Guardians. There can be one, there can be multiple. That's up to you. But these are the forces that stand in the way of important turning points during your hero's journey. It's not just at the threshold, but at any time they're crossing and making a big choice. These can include jealous enemies, actual professional gatekeepers, or even the hero's own fears and doubts. Some more common threshold guardians that you may know of are like a Draco Malfoy. The doorknob in Alice in Wonderland is very clear. You have to enter the threshold in there. Or even if you're thinking of comics, you could think of Heimdall in Thor. He runs the rainbow bridge, lets people in and out. Next up is going to be the Shapeshifter. In stories, these tend to be creatures that can take different shapes. Traditionally, they've been represented by characters like vampires or werewolves, but that doesn't always mean to have that sense of danger element to them. In life, they're just characters that represent change. They mean something to you in one stage and something that represents something else to you in another stage. Some famous shapeshifter characters can be people like Gollum or Professor Lockhart, or from Batman, you can think of like Catwoman, who's a little bit of two things. Next up is the Trickster. The Trickster is often referred to commonly as the comic relief in some ways. They'll definitely serve lots of different purposes, and they can have their own arcs and journeys as well, but they're definitely characters who would be considered mischief makers. Some popular tricksters include Merry and Pippin, and Dobby, the house elf. The last character archetype that we're going to talk about are allies. These are the characters that help the hero through the quest. You can have as many or as few as you would like. There's usually one ally that the hero relies on more than others, sometimes two, depends. A lot of times you'll see them come in pairs. This can be like Timon and Pumbaa. It could be like Ron and Hermione. It could also be like the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Lion. You may be thinking to yourself, now, Josh, there are many characters that you haven't mentioned in lots of different stories. And sure, not everybody's gonna fall into one of these types. Also, I didn't mention every character in every story as well. So that's where you get to have some freedom. If there is some character or characters that you want to add in, that's up to you. That's on your imagination and your creativity. You are as important to this story as this pattern that I'm laying out. What you bring is very important. Your voice, your words, they matter. Now, here's your assignment. Between this video and the last one, you should have the tools to now complete your next worksheet. That worksheet is your play script planning worksheet. Here, you'll be placing together the pieces that you need to write your play, your hero's journey as we're writing here. This will serve as an outline for the writing process. This will be your next step in writing down your script and your story. As you're doing this, I'm going to give you an additional assignment for this video. This will help us as we move forward with our next set of lessons. So there's two assignments coming out of this video for you to do. One, finish up that worksheet, that play planning worksheet. Secondly, I want you to start listening to the conversations that are happening around you. You're stuck inside and you're gonna hear people talk a whole bunch. As you're doing so, I want you to write down at least 40 seconds or so, about a little less than a minute, of a natural conversation. Try to listen and write down what you hear. The reason I'm asking you to do this is we're going to start talking about dialogue and how you write how characters can speak. Now, you can observe this in many different places, between two siblings, at the dinner table, all kinds of things. Be sure to let your family know that this is something that you're going to be doing so they're not a little bit caught off guard when you actually do it. Transcribe them down as dialogue. So write a person's name and then what they would say, and then a person's name and then what they would say. Almost as if you were trying to format it into a play. You'll use this as you move forward. But don't go away yet, because I've got one more optional assignment for you. Between the two videos, you now, I think, have a grasp of not only the parts of the story, but the characters in the story. So I challenge you, if you would like to watch one of the films that has been referenced, the stories that have been referenced. in this video or the previous video. Pick out the characters and the plot points if you can. This is an optional assignment. Just enjoy watching the story and see how these parts and pieces fit together. It'll help you get an idea of how we place these stories together. You may already be familiar with one of these, and if you watch that one again, start looking at it a little bit differently. See how they wrote their story and who they put into that story. That should get you through for a little bit to help us get ready for our next video. In future videos, of course, we'll talk about more elements needed, such as dialogue, characters, plot, all those different things to help you get your script going. By the end of this series, you'll hopefully have everything you need to start writing your own hero's journey. Have fun creating, and we'll certainly see you next time.